Trembling with rage, Elijah Maxwell showed his ID badge to the flight attendant who had humiliated him minutes before. "I'm not just a first-class passenger," he declared, "I'm the new CEO of Skyline Airways, your employer. Consider yourself terminated, effective immediately." Before we dive into how this shocking confrontation came to be, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to follow Elijah's journey from being publicly humiliated to turning the tables in the most unexpected way. Now, let's rewind to see how this ordinary morning turned into a defining moment. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., and Elijah Maxwell groaned as he reached over to silence it. At 38 years old, the successful black executive had grown accustomed to early mornings, but today felt different. Today marked a new chapter, though only a handful of people knew it yet. "Daddy! Are you up?" 8-year-old Zoe's voice echoed through their spacious Lincoln Park home, a far cry from the cramped South Side apartment where Elijah had grown up. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back, sliding his feet into his slippers. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across family photos that lined his dresser. Zoe's first day of school, her ballet recital, and one treasured photo of Elijah with his late wife, Amelia. In the kitchen, Zoe already had the cereal boxes out, her small hands carefully arranging them by color, a system only she understood. "We need to finish my science project before we go," she reminded him, carefully pouring milk into her bowl. "Miss Gabriella said it's due when we get back." Elijah smiled, marveling at his daughter's organization skills. "The aviation project? I thought we finished that last night." "We need to add glitter to the clouds," Zoe explained with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster for glitter-related emergencies. "And I want to practice my presentation. Did you know that the first black female pilot was Bessie Coleman? She had to go all the way to France to get her license because nobody would teach her here." Elijah's heart swelled with pride. He'd made sure Zoe knew about pioneers who looked like her. Something his own parents had done for him growing up in Chicago's South Side. "That's right, and now you're going to be flying first class to visit Grandma." "Times change, baby girl," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Is first class really different?" Zoe asked, eyes wide with anticipation. "The seats are bigger, the food is better, and they bring you whatever you want," Elijah explained, remembering his own first time in first class, a milestone in his career journey. Growing up, vacations had meant long bus rides to visit relatives. Planes were something he'd watched from the ground, tracing their paths with his finger against the sky. He'd promised himself then that his children would never face the limitations he had. As Zoe meticulously added silver glitter to cotton ball clouds on her project, Elijah's phone rang. The screen displayed Bernard Thompson, a board member at Skyline Airways. "Good morning, Bernard," Elijah answered, stepping into his home office. "Elijah. Just checking in before the big announcement tomorrow. The board couldn't be more pleased with our decision. You're going to make an excellent CEO." The words still felt surreal. After years climbing the corporate ladder, facing doubts and discrimination at every rung, Elijah had been selected to lead one of the country's major airlines. The news was being kept under wraps until the official announcement, scheduled for the day after his return from Atlanta. "Thank you for your confidence. I won't let you down," Elijah replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He would be one of only a handful of black CEOs in the entire airline industry. "Just get yourself and that brilliant daughter of yours to Atlanta, enjoy your mother's cooking, and prepare for the media circus," Bernard chuckled. "And remember, not a word to anyone until the press release." After ending the call, Elijah checked the time and felt a jolt of panic. They were running late. "Zoe. We need to move double time, kiddo." In the rush that followed, Elijah forgot to change from his comfortable weekend clothes, jeans and a casual button-down, into the business attire he'd laid out. They were halfway to O'Hare when he realized, but turning back wasn't an option. "We'll just have to make do," he told Zoe as they navigated morning traffic. His mind drifted to previous travel experiences, the time a flight attendant had directed him to economy despite his first-class ticket, the random security checks that somehow always seemed to find him, the surprise on people's faces when he took his seat in business class. Little indignities he'd learned to navigate with calculated calm. "You okay, Daddy?" Zoe asked, noticing his tightened grip on the steering wheel. Elijah relaxed his hands and smiled. "Just thinking, sweetheart. Today's going to be a good day." He hoped he was right. O'Hare International Airport buzzed with typical morning chaos, harried business travelers, families corralling excited children, and the constant drone of announcements over the PA system. Elijah guided Zoe through the crowded terminal, their carry-on luggage trailing behind them. "First-class check-in is that way, sir," Elijah said politely to the uniformed attendant who had started directing them toward the economy line without even glancing at their tickets. The young man looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Oh, of course. My apologies," he stammered, gesturing to the much shorter line beneath a priority sign. Zoe didn't miss the exchange. "Why did he think we weren't first class, Daddy?" Elijah chose his words carefully. "Sometimes people make assumptions about others based on how they look." At the first-class counter, the check-in process went smoothly until they reached security. Despite the dedicated lane for premium passengers, a TSA agent waved Elijah aside. "Random security check, sir," the agent said, though he hadn't randomly selected anyone else from the first-class line. Elijah caught Zoe's eye and gave her a reassuring nod. "It's okay, sweetheart. This happens sometimes." As the agent meticulously went through Elijah's carry-on, two white executives in expensive suits sailed through without a second glance. One muttered to the other just loudly enough for Elijah to hear, "Affirmative action even extends to TSA screening these days, I guess." His companion chuckled. "Or maybe they're checking if his first-class ticket is real." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. Years of navigating corporate America had taught him when to pick his battles. After security, Zoe tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, why did those men say that? And why did they check our bags extra?" Elijah guided her to a quieter corner of the terminal. He crouched down to her level, something he always did for important conversations. "Remember when we talked about how some people judge others by the color of their skin instead of who they are inside?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "Like in my book about Dr. Martin Luther King?" "Exactly. Some people still do that, even today. They see us and make assumptions about where we should be or what we can afford." "That's not fair," Zoe said with the straightforward indignation of childhood. "You're right, it's not. But we don't let it stop us, do we?" He smoothed a hand over her curly hair. "No," she agreed. "We keep going. That's my girl." As they approached the first-class lounge, an older white gentleman held the door open for them. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Thank you," Elijah replied, pleasantly surprised by the simple courtesy. Inside the lounge, the man approached them again. "Walter Bennett," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Couldn't help but notice the science project. My granddaughter's about the same age, always has some glitter-covered creation in tow." Elijah shook his hand. "Elijah Maxwell. This is my daughter, Zoe." Walter settled into a nearby chair. Unlike many executives Elijah had encountered, Walter spoke to him without condescension or awkward overfamiliarity. They discussed the changing business landscape, and Walter shared stories from his 40 years in corporate America. "Things are changing," Walter noted. "Slowly, sometimes painfully so, but changing nonetheless. 20 years ago, I was often the only person in the room advocating for diversity. Now, companies are finally recognizing talent regardless of packaging." Their conversation was interrupted by a flight attendant who entered the lounge, scanning passengers with practiced efficiency. Her name tag read, Patricia Harris, Senior Flight Attendant. Her gaze settled on Elijah and Zoe, lingering just long enough to be noticeable before her lips pressed into a thin line. She approached other passengers, checking if they needed anything before boarding, but conspicuously skipped their corner. Walter noticed too. Some people take longer to adjust to change, he commented quietly. Zoe's earlier excitement about flying first class had dimmed. She sat closer to her father, the animation in her face replaced by watchfulness. Elijah felt a familiar heaviness. The burden of preparing his daughter for a world that wouldn't always welcome her with open arms, while still preserving her joyful spirit. It was a balancing act every black parent knew too well. The boarding announcement came over the speakers, and Elijah gathered their belongings, grateful to be leaving the increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere of the lounge. "Safe travels," Walter said, shaking Elijah's hand again. "Perhaps our paths will cross in Atlanta." As they exited, Patricia Harris watched them go, her expression unreadable but her attention unmistakable. "Skyline Airways welcomes our first-class and priority passengers for Flight 1867 to Atlanta," announced the gate agent. "Please have your boarding passes ready." Elijah took Zoe's hand, and they joined the short line of well-dressed passengers. Most were engrossed in their phones or engaged in quiet conversation. A few glanced up as Elijah and Zoe took their place in line, their eyes lingering a beat too long. Patricia Harris stood at the gate entrance, scanning boarding passes with practiced efficiency. She smiled warmly at an older white couple ahead of them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Davis. Lovely to see you again." When Elijah and Zoe stepped forward, her smile thinned. She took their boarding passes, examining them with unusual scrutiny. "These are first-class tickets," she stated, as if the information surprised her. "Yes, they are," Elijah confirmed evenly. After a pause that stretched just beyond comfortable, she returned the passes. "Boarding through the left door." "Thank you," Elijah replied, ushering Zoe forward before she could notice the interaction's subtle hostility. As they entered the aircraft, a younger flight attendant greeted them with genuine warmth. "Welcome aboard. First class is the first 3 rows on either side." "Thank you," Elijah said, appreciating her natural smile. They found their seats easily. 1A and 1B, right at the front of the plane. Zoe immediately claimed the window seat, pressing her nose against the glass to watch the ground crew. "This is so cool, Daddy. We can see everything from here." Elijah stored their carry-ons in the overhead compartment, noticing how a woman across the aisle clutched her designer purse a little tighter as he reached above her seat. He pretended not to notice, having long ago mastered the art of appearing oblivious to such reactions. Have you ever had to pretend not to notice when someone treated you differently? Comment number 1 if you've experienced this kind of subtle discrimination, or number 2 if you think people are sometimes too quick to label interactions as prejudice. Like and subscribe to follow Elijah's journey through this tense situation. And ask yourself, what would you do if you were in his place, trying to protect your child while maintaining your dignity? "Can I offer you something to drink before takeoff?" A friendly male flight attendant appeared beside them, his name tag reading, Trevor Scott. "Apple juice, please." Zoe replied. "Water would be great, thank you," Elijah added. Coming right up, Trevor said with a genuine smile that reached his eyes. As Trevor moved to the galley, Elijah relaxed slightly. His first corporate job after graduating from Northwestern had featured similar dynamics. Isolation, subtle exclusion, doubts about his qualifications. He'd learned to navigate these waters with calculated precision, choosing which battles to fight and which to let go. "Daddy," Zoe whispered, leaning close, "I think some people don't think we belong here." The observation, so accurate and so heartbreaking coming from an 8-year-old, made Elijah's chest tighten. He'd hoped to shield her from these realities a little longer. "Some people make assumptions about others without knowing them," he explained quietly. "But we know we belong wherever we choose to be. Never doubt that." Zoe nodded, but the carefree excitement she'd shown earlier had diminished. She sipped her apple juice when Trevor brought it, thanking him politely but without her usual chatter. Elijah noticed Patricia Harris passing by their row repeatedly, each time glancing their way with poorly concealed suspicion. The other passengers in first class had all been served their pre-flight beverages, their boarding passes checked once and then forgotten. Yet Patricia seemed fixated on their presence, as if trying to solve a puzzle that didn't exist. "Is everything all right, sir?" Trevor asked quietly, noticing Elijah's tension. "Fine, thank you," Elijah replied automatically, the response ingrained after years of smoothing over uncomfortable situations. As the final preparations for takeoff began, Elijah hoped the flight would proceed without incident. He needed this time with Zoe, away from work pressures and the impending announcement of his new position. Just a father and daughter visiting grandma, was that too much to ask? The seatbelt sign illuminated with a chime, and the main cabin door closed with a definitive thunk. Elijah helped Zoe with her seatbelt, then fastened his own, settling in for what he hoped would be an uneventful flight to Atlanta. But Patricia Harris had other ideas. The aircraft had been fully boarded, safety demonstrations completed, and the plane was preparing for pushback from the gate. Passengers had settled into that quiet lull before takeoff, some reading, others already dozing, most absorbed in their personal electronic devices. Patricia Harris appeared beside their row again, this time with purpose in her stride. She leaned over slightly, her voice pitched just loudly enough that passengers in nearby seats could hear. "Excuse me, sir. I need to see your boarding passes again." Elijah looked up from the book he was sharing with Zoe. "Is there a problem?" "Just a routine check," Patricia replied, though nothing about her demeanor suggested routine. Every eye in first class had turned toward them. Zoe shrank in her seat, her small body tensing beside him. Elijah reached into his pocket and produced their boarding passes again, maintaining eye contact with Patricia as he handed them over. Years of corporate negotiations had taught him to stay composed under pressure, though he felt a familiar heat rising at the back of his neck. Patricia made a show of examining the passes, turning them over in her hands. These seats are usually reserved for our frequent flyers or full-fare passengers. We purchased these tickets like everyone else," Elijah stated calmly, though his pulse had quickened. "Perhaps there's been a mix-up," Patricia continued. "These seats are premium locations. Are you sure you wouldn't be more comfortable in economy? We could arrange that." The implication hung in the air, unmistakable. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman across the aisle, her designer handbag now safely stowed, leaned forward with interest. "There's no mistake," Elijah assured her, his voice level but firm. "These are our assigned seats." Patricia's lips tightened. "I'll need to see some identification, please." "Company policy." Elijah knew perfectly well this wasn't policy. He'd flown first class dozens of times without being asked for ID after boarding. But he reached for his wallet anyway, determined to handle the situation without escalation. Zoe was watching, learning from his every reaction. "Daddy," Zoe whispered, her voice small, "did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Elijah assured her, handing his driver's license to Patricia. "Everything's fine." The woman across the aisle, her name tag from an earlier introduction to a seatmate reading, Karen Wilson, chose this moment to interject. "Excuse me," she said to Patricia, not bothering to lower her voice. "I think these people might be more comfortable elsewhere. First class has certain standards." Trevor appeared from the galley, concern etched on his face. "Patricia, we're ready for pushback. Is there an issue?" "I'm handling a situation with these passengers," Patricia replied dismissively. "Their presence here seems irregular." Trevor frowned. "They have first-class tickets. I've already served them." "Trevor, please return to your duties," Patricia snapped. "This requires senior attention." Elijah felt Zoe trembling beside him. He looked down to see tears welling in her eyes. "Ma'am," Elijah said, his voice still controlled but with an edge of steel now, "my daughter and I have valid tickets for these seats. We've been checked multiple times already. This is becoming harassment." Patricia's expression hardened. "Sir, if you can't verify how you came to be in these seats, I'll need to involve the captain and possibly security." The comment hit Elijah like a physical blow. The implication that he couldn't have legitimately purchased first-class tickets, that his presence required explanation or justification, triggered memories of countless similar humiliations throughout his life. An image flashed in his mind, 10-year-old Elijah being followed by a store detective while white children browsed freely, 20-year-old Elijah being asked if he was in the right classroom on his first day at Northwestern. 30-year-old Elijah being mistaken for waitstaff at a corporate gala. And now, 38-year-old Elijah watching his daughter learn the same painful lesson he'd hoped to spare her from a little longer. Something snapped inside him. Not in rage, but in clarity. This moment, he realized, wasn't just about him or even Zoe. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel they didn't belong in spaces they had every right to occupy. And for once, he was in a position to do more than just endure it. "You know what?" Elijah said, his voice quiet but carrying in the hushed cabin. "You're right. I should identify myself properly." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew not his driver's license, but a different ID altogether. He handed it to Patricia. "My name is Elijah Maxwell. As of yesterday, I'm the new Chief Executive Officer of Skyline Airways, your employer. This information hasn't been made public yet, but I assure you it's quite real. And you, Ms. Harris, have just demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that I plan to eliminate from our company culture." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia Harris stared at the ID badge in her hands, her face draining of color. This can't be real," she stammered, looking from the identification card to Elijah's face and back again. "I assure you it is," Elijah replied evenly. "But since you seem to require additional verification, I'm happy to provide it." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number on speaker. After 2 rings, a voice answered, "Gregory Simmons, Chief Operations Officer." "Greg, it's Elijah Maxwell. I apologize for the interruption, but I have a situation on Flight 1867 that requires your confirmation of my position." There was a pause before Greg responded. "Is everything all right, Elijah? The board is expecting you in Atlanta. I'm currently being questioned about my right to sit in first class by one of your senior flight attendants, despite having shown my company ID." "What?" Greg's voice sharpened with alarm. "Put the flight attendant on, please." With a trembling hand, Patricia took the phone. "This is Senior Flight Attendant Patricia Harris." "Ms. Harris," Greg's voice was ice-cold through the speaker, "you are addressing Elijah Maxwell, the new Chief Executive Officer of Skyline Airways. His appointment will be announced publicly tomorrow, but I can assure you it is very much official. Whatever issue you believe exists needs to be resolved immediately and with the utmost professionalism." By now, every passenger in first class was watching the scene unfold with rapt attention. Trevor stood nearby, his expression a mixture of shock and something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. Karen Wilson had sunk low in her seat, suddenly intensely interested in the safety card in the seat back pocket. Patricia handed the phone back to Elijah with visibly shaking hands. "Mr. Maxwell, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. I was simply following." "You were not following any Skyline Airways policy," Elijah cut her off, his voice firm but not raised. "What you were following were your own prejudices and assumptions." Patricia's face flushed. "Sir, I assure you this had nothing to do with, it had everything to do with how my daughter and I look," Elijah stated plainly. "You didn't question any other passenger's right to be here. You suggested we would be more comfortable in economy. You implied we couldn't have legitimately purchased these tickets. From the back of first class, a middle-aged black woman in a business suit caught Elijah's eye and gave a small, affirming nod. 2 rows behind her, a young black man in casual clothes watched the confrontation with poorly concealed satisfaction. Elijah continued, "Ms. Harris, I believe in accountability. As CEO, I cannot allow employees who discriminate against passengers to represent our airline. Please," Patricia's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "I've been with Skyline for 15 years. I have an exemplary record. This is a misunderstanding that made my 8-year-old daughter cry and ask if she'd done something wrong," Elijah pointed out. "A misunderstanding that humiliated us in front of an entire cabin of passengers." Walter Bennett, who had been observing silently from his seat across the aisle, finally spoke up. "If I may, Mr. Maxwell. I witnessed Ms. Harris's behavior in the lounge as well. It was targeted." Patricia's pleading expression crumpled. "Mr. Maxwell, please. I have a mortgage, a family, as do many people who face discrimination every day," Elijah replied. "Their financial obligations don't protect them from prejudice. Why should yours protect you from consequences?" The captain appeared at the front of the cabin, his presence commanding immediate attention. "What's going on here?" "We've been delayed for pushback." Elijah stood, offering his hand. "Captain, I'm Elijah Maxwell, incoming CEO of Skyline Airways." The captain's eyebrows shot up in recognition. "Mr. Maxwell. We received a notification you might be traveling today, but we're told to maintain discretion. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we have a situation involving discriminatory treatment by a member of your crew." Quickly and precisely, Elijah explained what had transpired. The captain listened, his expression growing increasingly grave. "Ms. Harris," the captain finally said, "please gather your belongings and exit the aircraft. The ground crew will escort you to HR." "But," Patricia began. "That's an order," the captain stated firmly. As Patricia moved to comply, her face a mask of shock and humiliation, Karen Wilson finally spoke up from her seat. "This is ridiculous. She was just doing her job, making sure everyone was in their proper place." Elijah turned to her calmly. "And what exactly is our proper place, Ms. Wilson?" Karen faltered, suddenly aware of how her words could be interpreted. "I didn't mean, I think you've said enough," Walter Bennett interrupted. "Perhaps it's time for reflection rather than further commentary." As Patricia was escorted toward the exit, her shoulders slumped in defeat, Zoe tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, loud enough that those nearby could hear, "is the mean lady in trouble because of us?" Elijah crouched down to his daughter's level. "No, sweetheart. She's in trouble because of her own actions. Remember what we talked about? People are responsible for their choices." Zoe nodded solemnly, though confusion still clouded her eyes. The captain turned to the rest of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be proceeding with our departure shortly. Thank you for your patience." As he returned to the cockpit, a scattered applause broke out among some passengers. Others looked uncomfortable or confused. The division was palpable, a microcosm of the broader world outside the airplane's pressurized cabin. Trevor approached Elijah, speaking quietly. "Mr. Maxwell, we'll have another flight attendant joining us momentarily. Is there anything I can get for you or your daughter in the meantime?" "Just a normal, pleasant flight," Elijah replied with a tired smile. "That's all we wanted from the beginning." The replacement flight attendant arrived quickly, a woman in her early 30s with a warm smile and efficient movements. Her name tag read, Gabriela Rodriguez. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Gabriela, taking over as your senior flight attendant for this flight to Atlanta. We apologize for the delay and thank you for your patience. We'll be pushing back from the gate momentarily." The aircraft finally began moving, the gentle backwards motion signaling the start of their journey. Tension still hung in the air of the first-class cabin, the aftermath of the confrontation lingering like static electricity. Zoe remained unusually quiet, her face turned toward the window as they taxied toward the runway. Elijah felt a pang of regret. Had he done the right thing? The question echoed in his mind as the engines revved for takeoff. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision in front of your child? Comment number 1 if you think Elijah was right to stand up to discrimination, even if it meant creating a scene. Or comment number 2 if you believe he should have handled it privately for his daughter's sake. Like and subscribe if you've ever had to choose between standing up for yourself and keeping the peace. How far would you go to protect both your dignity and your child's innocence? As the plane climbed into the sky, Elijah recalled the words of his first mentor, Dr. William Davis, a professor at Northwestern who'd taken an interest in the promising young student from Chicago's South Side. Sometimes standing up requires making hard choices, Dr. Davis had told him. Choices that might make you uncomfortable, might make others uncomfortable. But comfort has never been the path to change. Had this been one of those moments? Or had he simply lost his temper and potentially traumatized his daughter in the process? Once they reached cruising altitude, Trevor made his way to their seats, kneeling beside them to speak quietly. "Mr. Maxwell," he began, his voice low, "I want to thank you. Patricia has been doing this for years, little comments, extra checks, suggesting certain passengers might be more comfortable elsewhere. We've filed complaints, but nothing ever happens." Elijah hadn't expected this. "You've reported her before?" Trevor nodded. "Several of us have. But she's been here so long, has friends in management, the complaints always disappeared into the void." The knowledge that Patricia's behavior was a pattern rather than an isolated incident eased some of Elijah's doubt, but the regret about Zoe witnessing the confrontation remained. As the service began, Gabriella approached with genuine warmth. "Can I get you anything to drink, Mr. Maxwell? And for the young lady?" "Apple juice, please," Zoe requested, her voice smaller than usual. "Water for me, thank you," Elijah added. When Gabriella returned with their drinks, she hesitated briefly. "Mr. Maxwell, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but, thank you. I've experienced similar treatment myself, both as an employee and as a passenger when traveling off-duty." Elijah nodded in understanding. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you know that changes are coming." "That's why I wanted to say thank you," Gabriella replied with a genuine smile before continuing her service. Throughout the next hour, several passengers made their way to Elijah's seat, a young black attorney who shared his own travel experiences, an older Asian couple who spoke of similar encounters, a white mother traveling with her biracial children who expressed gratitude for his stand. Karen Wilson, meanwhile, had requested to move seats, but with the flight full, she remained trapped in her embarrassment, studiously avoiding eye contact with anyone around her. Walter Bennett made his way forward to sit in an empty seat near Elijah while his seatmate visited the lavatory. "Quite the introduction to your new role," the older man observed. Elijah smiled ruefully. "Not exactly how I planned to begin. Sometimes leadership isn't planned. It's thrust upon us at unexpected moments," Walter replied. "How we respond in those moments defines our legacy more than any strategic plan or quarterly report. I'm concerned about the example I set for my daughter," Elijah admitted, glancing at Zoe, who was now absorbed in a game on her tablet. "You showed her that her dignity matters," Walter said simply. "That her right to occupy space isn't contingent on anyone else's approval. There are worse lessons for a child to learn." Before Walter could continue, the aircraft encountered a patch of turbulence, the sudden jolts mirroring Elijah's internal state, unsettled, uncertain of what awaited on the other side. As the seatbelt sign illuminated with a chime, Elijah's phone buzzed with incoming messages. The board members had somehow already heard about the incident. Some expressed support, others concern about potential legal issues. The news was spreading faster than the aircraft itself was moving. Elijah put his phone away, feeling the weight of uncertainty. Would this incident define his leadership before it officially began? Had he damaged the very opportunity he'd worked so hard to attain? Beside him, Zoe had fallen asleep, her head resting against his arm. Looking at her peaceful face, Elijah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever came next, he would face it, not just for himself, but for her future and the futures of countless others who deserved to be treated with dignity. The turbulence subsided, and the plane continued its journey toward Atlanta, where unknown challenges awaited them both. The first indication that something had changed came when they began their descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants normally kept cell phones stowed during this phase, but Elijah noticed Trevor and Gabriella huddled near the galley, looking at a phone screen with wide eyes. When they landed at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Elijah turned his own phone back on and was immediately bombarded with notifications. Texts, emails, missed calls, social media alerts, all flooding in at once. "Mr. Maxwell," Trevor approached as passengers prepared to deplane, "you should know that, well, the incident has gone viral." "What do you mean?" Elijah asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Several passengers recorded what happened," Trevor explained, looking both apologetic and concerned. "The videos are all over social media. #SeeYoinCoach is trending." Elijah winced at the hashtag's irony. They'd been in first class, not coach, yet the narrative was already being rewritten by the internet's game of telephone. As they stepped off the plane, Elijah was startled to see several people in the jet bridge holding up phones, clearly recording their exit. Instinctively, he moved to shield Zoe. "Daddy, why are those people taking pictures?" she asked, clinging to his hand. "Remember how we talked about social media?" he replied calmly. "Sometimes things happen that people want to share." The situation in the terminal was even more chaotic. A small crowd had gathered near their gate, some appeared to be journalists, others simply curious onlookers. Elijah spotted his mother, Regina, standing at the periphery, her face a mixture of concern and fierce pride. "There's Grandma," he said to Zoe, guiding her through the crowd with a protective arm around her shoulders. Regina Maxwell was a formidable woman at 65. She'd raised Elijah alone after his father's early death, working 2 jobs while pursuing her nursing degree. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in her customary neat bun, and her posture remained ramrod straight, a woman who had faced down too many challenges in life to be easily intimidated. "Ma," Elijah greeted her with a hug. "My boy," she replied, embracing him tightly before crouching to envelop Zoe in her arms. "And my beautiful grandbaby. Grandma." Zoe's face lit up with the first genuine smile Elijah had seen since before the confrontation. "Let's get out of here," Regina suggested, eyeing the growing crowd. "My car's close." As they made their way through the terminal, Elijah's phone rang again. Bernard Thompson's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," he told his mother. "Elijah," Bernard began without preamble, "have you seen what's happening online?" "I'm just learning about it," Elijah replied, keeping his voice low. "How bad is it?" "It's complicated," Bernard said. "The board is divided. Some think you overstepped, concerns about wrongful termination, employment law complications. Others are applauding you for taking a stand against discrimination. The video clips are somewhat fragmented, so different people are seeing different parts of the interaction." "I stand by my decision," Elijah stated firmly. "I expected as much," Bernard replied. "Look, we've booked you a suite at the Meridian Hotel instead of your mother's place. We need to contain this, develop a strategy. The PR team is flying in tonight." Elijah glanced at his mother and daughter, walking ahead of him. Zoe had been looking forward to staying at Grandma's house, with its backyard swing and the piano she loved to plunk at. "I appreciate the thought, Bernard, but we'll be staying with my mother as planned. I'm not going to disrupt my daughter's visit further. The PR team can meet us there tomorrow." After a pause, Bernard conceded. "All right. But Elijah, be prepared. This is just the beginning. By the time they reached Regina's modest but well-kept home in Atlanta's historic West End neighborhood, the situation had escalated further. Hashtag Skyline discrimination was now trending alongside hashtag #SeeYoingCoach. Former Skyline employees had begun sharing their own stories of Patricia Harris's behavior toward passengers of color. Regina's living room became an impromptu crisis management center. While Zoe practiced on the old upright piano in the corner, Elijah participated in a video conference with several board members. "The legal department is concerned," said Helen Richardson, the board's most conservative member. "Patricia Harris could claim wrongful termination. You weren't officially CEO yet, and there are procedures for employee discipline." "With all due respect, Helen," countered Marcus Jordan, one of the board members who had championed Elijah's appointment, "what we're seeing is exactly why we chose Elijah. He recognized a systematic problem and took decisive action." "But the optics," Helen began. "The optics are exactly the point," Elijah interjected. "What message would it send if our airline tolerates employees who profile passengers based on race? What does that say about our values as a company?" The debate continued, with positions hardening on both sides. Meanwhile, Elijah's social media accounts were flooded with messages, some supportive, others accusing him of overreacting or leveraging his new position for personal vengeance. A new development emerged when a news outlet published an article featuring interviews with multiple former Skyline passengers who claimed Patricia Harris had subjected them to similar treatment over the years. "Did you know about these previous complaints?" Elijah asked Trevor during a brief phone call. "Yes," Trevor confirmed. "But they were always dismissed as misunderstandings or oversensitivity. Patricia has friends in middle management who protected her." The information hardened Elijah's resolve. This hadn't been an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a pattern of behavior that the company had systematically ignored. Later that evening, as Zoe helped Regina prepare dinner, she approached her father with a worried expression. "Daddy, are you in trouble? I heard Grandma talking on the phone. She said people are saying mean things about you." Elijah sat down at the kitchen table, patting the chair beside him. Zoe climbed up, her brown eyes serious. "Some people are upset about what happened on the plane," he explained carefully. "And that's okay. When you stand up for what's right, not everyone will agree with you." "But you didn't do anything wrong," Zoe insisted. "That lady was mean to us for no reason." "That's true," Elijah agreed. "But some people think I should have handled it differently." "How?" It was a good question, one that had been nagging at him since the incident. "Maybe more privately. Maybe with less consequences for her." Zoe considered this, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "But Daddy, you always tell me that choices have consequences." From the stove, Regina chuckled. "Smart girl," she commented. "Reminds me of someone else at that age, always cutting straight to the heart of things." That night, after Zoe had gone to bed, Regina joined Elijah on the back porch, where he sat scrolling through the seemingly endless commentary about the incident. "You remember what happened to me at Grady Memorial?" she asked, settling into the rocking chair beside him. Elijah nodded. His mother had been a nurse there for 30 years before retiring. In her final year, she'd been passed over for a supervisory position in favor of a less qualified white nurse. She'd filed a complaint, endured months of hostile work environment, and eventually won her case, but the victory had come at a steep personal cost. "People said I should have kept quiet, should have accepted it," Regina continued. "Said I was making trouble for myself and others. But some troubles need to be made, Elijah. Some systems don't change until they're forced to." She reached over to pat his hand. "You did right by your daughter today. You showed her that she doesn't have to accept being treated as less than. That lesson is worth whatever storm comes your way." Elijah squeezed his mother's hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. Whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, he would face them head-on, not just for himself or Zoe, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong. Morning arrived with intensified scrutiny. Overnight, the hashtags had evolved, opinions had polarized, and what had been a viral moment was now a full-blown corporate crisis. A video conference with the entire Skyline Airways board had been scheduled for 10 a.m. Elijah woke early, spending a quiet moment watching Zoe sleep in Regina's guest room. Her face, peaceful in slumber, reminded him of everything at stake, not just his career, but the example he was setting for his daughter and the precedent he would establish as CEO. After a breakfast where Regina fussed over them both, crisis or no crisis, nobody faces the world on an empty stomach in my house, Elijah set up his laptop in his mother's study. The board members' faces populated his screen one by one, their expressions ranging from supportive to concerned to openly hostile. "Let's get right to it," said Thomas Williamson, the board chairman. "We're facing a significant PR situation that could impact the company's reputation and stock price. Elijah, you've put us in a difficult position before even officially taking the reins." "With respect, Thomas," Elijah replied, "Patricia Harris put us in this position with her discriminatory behavior. I simply refuse to ignore it." "The question isn't whether her behavior was appropriate," Helen Richardson interjected. "It's whether your response was proportional and followed company protocols." "What protocols exist for a CEO being racially profiled on his own airline?" Marcus Jordan countered. "Sometimes leadership requires decisive action outside established channels." The debate continued, positions entrenched on both sides. Elijah listened carefully, understanding that this moment would define his leadership before it officially began. When everyone had spoken, Thomas turned to him. "Elijah, you've heard our concerns and support. What do you propose we do now?" Elijah had been contemplating this question since the incident occurred. This wasn't just about one flight attendant or one uncomfortable encounter, it was about the culture of the entire organization and the message they wanted to send to employees and customers alike. "I believe we have an opportunity," he began. "Not just to address this incident, but to transform our company culture. I'm proposing a comprehensive initiative focused on inclusion and respect at every level of our organization." He outlined his vision. Mandatory training for all customer-facing staff, a transparent system for reporting and addressing discriminatory behavior, diversity recruitment goals, and a passenger bill of rights that explicitly prohibited profiling. "As for the immediate situation," he continued, "I stand by my decision regarding Patricia Harris. Her behavior reflected a pattern that our company had ignored for too long. However, I recognize the concerns about process. I'm willing to have my first official act as CEO be the establishment of an independent review board for similar incidents in the future." The board members exchanged glances. It was a bold proposal, one that acknowledged the legitimacy of concerns while refusing to back down on the core principle. "I'd like to put this to a vote," Thomas said after a moment of consideration. "All in favor of accepting Elijah's proposal and moving forward with his appointment as planned?" One by one, hands raised on the screen. Even Helen Richardson, after a moment's hesitation, raised hers. "It seems we have consensus," Thomas announced. "Elijah, in light of the circumstances, we're moving up the announcement of your appointment to today. Our PR team will coordinate a press conference for this afternoon." After the call ended, Elijah found Zoe in the living room, showing Regina her aviation science project. "Daddy, can I add more glitter? Grandma says it needs sparkle." "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, sitting down beside them. "But first, I need to talk to you about something important." He explained, in terms she could understand, what would happen next, the press conference, the announcement of his new job, the questions people might ask about what happened on the plane. "Will they ask me questions too?" Zoe asked, her eyes widening with alarm. "No, baby. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to," he assured her. "But I wanted you to know what's happening." Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "Daddy, remember when Amelia in my class was being mean to Mason because his lunch looked different? And Miss Gabriella told us that being kind is more important than being right? Elijah nodded, curious where his daughter's wisdom was leading. I think that lady on the plane forgot to be kind, Zoe continued. Maybe she needs a teacher like Miss Gabriella to help her remember. The simplicity and compassion in his daughter's perspective struck Elijah profoundly. In her 8-year-old wisdom, she'd cut through the complexity to the heart of the matter. Later that morning, Walter Bennett arrived at Regina's house, having tracked Elijah down through mutual connections. Hope I'm not intruding, the older man said when Regina showed him to the back porch where Elijah was preparing his remarks for the press conference. Not at all, Elijah assured him. I appreciate your support yesterday. Walter settled into a chair. I've been in business for 40 years, Elijah. Seen a lot of leaders come and go. The best ones are those who recognize when a moment isn't just about themselves, when it's about setting a standard that will outlast their tenure. He offered strategic advice about handling the press, managing board expectations, and balancing firmness with grace in the public eye. As they talked, Elijah's phone buzzed with a message from Trevor, the flight crew is behind you. We've formed a group to support changes at Skyline. Also, I've documented all the complaints against Patricia that were dismissed. Let me know if you need them. Another message arrived from an unexpected source, Karen Wilson, the passenger who had supported Patricia's actions. Mr. Maxwell, I've been reflecting on my behavior. It was inexcusable. I'm ashamed of how I acted and the assumptions I made. This isn't a request for forgiveness, just an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I'm committed to doing better. Each message reinforced what Elijah had begun to realize: this moment was bigger than one incident on one flight. It was about challenging patterns that had gone unchallenged for too long. As the time for the press conference approached, Elijah found himself briefly alone with his mother in the kitchen. I keep thinking about what Dad would say, he admitted. Regina's husband, Elijah's father, had been a civil rights activist in his youth before becoming a high school teacher. Regina smiled, the memory of her late husband softening her features. Franklin would tell you what he always told his students: justice isn't always comfortable, but it's always right. She straightened his tie with practiced hands. You go show them what leadership really means, son. With his mother's words echoing in his mind and his daughter's wisdom in his heart, Elijah prepared to step into the spotlight, not just as a CEO, but as someone willing to stand for change, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. The hotel conference room buzzed with activity, camera crews adjusting equipment, journalists checking recorders, PR staff distributing press packets. The Skyline Airways logo dominated the backdrop, the company's slogan, "Reaching New Heights Together," displayed prominently beneath it. Elijah stood in a side room, Zoe beside him holding his hand. He'd given her the choice to wait with Regina, but she had insisted on staying with him. "Ready, Daddy?" she asked, looking up at him with complete confidence, the kind only a child can offer, uncomplicated by doubt or cynicism. "Ready," he confirmed, giving her small hand a squeeze. Thomas Williamson entered, his expression serious but supportive. "Full house out there. Board members are seated front row. We've prepared a statement, but..." He hesitated. "But you're wondering if I'll stick to it," Elijah finished for him. Thomas nodded. "The PR team has crafted something diplomatic. It addresses the incident without inflaming tensions further." Elijah considered the carefully worded statement he'd reviewed earlier, a masterpiece of corporate communication that said everything and nothing simultaneously. "I appreciate their work," he said finally, "but I need to speak from the heart today. People will know if I'm just reading talking points." Thomas looked like he wanted to object but ultimately nodded. "It's your show now, Elijah. We're behind you." He crouched down to Zoe's level. "And you must be the famous Zoe I've heard so much about. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He's going to be the boss of the whole airplane company," Zoe informed him seriously. "Yes, he is," Thomas agreed with equal seriousness. And a very good one, I think. As Thomas left, Trevor and Gabriella appeared in the doorway, both now in civilian clothes. "We wanted to wish you luck," Trevor said. "A lot of the crew is watching this live stream. You've got more support than you know." "Thank you both," Elijah replied. "For everything." The PR director poked her head in. 2 minutes, Mr. Maxwell." With a deep breath, Elijah stepped toward the door, Zoe still holding his hand. The flashbulbs began immediately as they entered the conference room. Elijah approached the podium, lifting Zoe to stand beside him. The room fell silent, pens poised over notepads, cameras focused intently. "Good afternoon," Elijah began. "My name is Elijah Maxwell. As of today, I am the new Chief Executive Officer of Skyline Airways. This isn't how I plan to introduce myself to you." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, the board members in the front row, journalists from every major outlet, and at the back of the room, a surprise, Regina had arrived, standing beside Walter Bennett. "I grew up on Chicago's South Side," Elijah continued. "My mother worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on our table. When I was 10, I watched a plane fly overhead and told her someday I'd fly in one. She didn't tell me it was impossible, even though in 1990 Chicago, a black kid from our neighborhood had slim chances of achieving that dream." He glanced down at Zoe, who was watching him with pride. "Yesterday, my daughter and I boarded a Skyline Airways flight in first class. What should have been a routine journey became something else entirely when we were singled out, questioned, and humiliated based on assumptions about who belongs in premium cabins." Cameras clicked rapidly as he recounted the incident, carefully omitting details that might embarrass Zoe further. He explained his position, his decision regarding Patricia Harris, and his vision for change at Skyline Airways. "This isn't about one flight attendant," he emphasized. "It's about a culture that allowed her behavior to continue unchecked despite multiple previous complaints. It's about the difference between saying we value diversity and inclusion and actually creating environments where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." He outlined the comprehensive initiative he'd proposed to the board, the training programs, the reporting systems, the commitment to diversifying the company at every level. "But I've been reflecting on something my daughter said this morning," Elijah continued, placing a gentle hand on Zoe's shoulder. "She reminded me that kindness should always be our first response, even in difficult situations." A murmur went through the crowd as Elijah announced his most surprising decision: "Therefore, I'm offering Patricia Harris an alternative to termination. If she's willing to undergo comprehensive training and work with our newly established diversity and inclusion team, she'll be offered a position helping to train other employees about unconscious bias and respectful customer interaction. Sometimes the people who've made mistakes have the most powerful lessons to teach others." At the back of the room, a woman stepped forward, Patricia Harris herself, looking vastly different from the confident, dismissive flight attendant of yesterday. Her face showed evidence of tears, her posture diminished by the weight of public scrutiny. Their eyes met across the crowded room. After a moment of palpable tension, Elijah gave her a small nod, not of forgiveness exactly, but of acknowledgement. An opening for transformation. Patricia's eyes welled with tears as she nodded back, the gravity of the moment, and the unexpected grace being extended, visibly affecting her. "Skyline Airways is embarking on a new journey today," Elijah continued, returning his attention to the assembled press. "One where we recognize that reaching new heights together means ensuring everyone feels respected and valued, both our employees and our passengers." He gestured to the board members. "I'm grateful to have the unanimous support of our board in this vision." One by one, the board members stood, a visible demonstration of unity that sent another ripple of surprise through the journalists. "I'd like to introduce Trevor Scott," Elijah continued, gesturing for Trevor to join him. "Trevor has been appointed as our new head of passenger experience, tasked with ensuring every customer receives the respect and service they deserve." Trevor stepped forward, shaking Elijah's hand firmly before taking the microphone. "Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I'm honored to accept this position and committed to creating a culture where every passenger feels welcomed and valued, regardless of their background. After Trevor stepped back, Walter Bennett approached the podium. Skyline Airways and Bennett Consulting are announcing a partnership today, the older man declared. We'll be implementing executive diversity training programs across the organization, ensuring leadership has the tools to foster truly inclusive environments. The questions from journalists came rapid fire after the presentations. Mr. Maxwell, do you think your response was proportionate? Was this a publicity stunt to launch your tenure as CEO? Do you worry about legal repercussions from Ms. Harris? How will you measure the success of these initiatives? Elijah answered each with thoughtful consideration, neither defensive nor combative, acknowledging complexities while standing firm on principles. As the conference was drawing to a close, Zoe tugged at his sleeve. "Can I say something, Daddy?" Surprised, Elijah hesitated before lowering the microphone to her level. The room fell silent again, cameras focusing on the small girl in a yellow dress. "My daddy always tells me that we should treat people the way we want to be treated," Zoe said, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "I think if everyone did that on airplanes and everywhere else, the world would be a lot nicer." "Thank you." Her simple wisdom drew spontaneous applause, cutting through the tension and complexity with childlike clarity. As the press conference concluded, Elijah felt a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but today marked a beginning, not just for his career, but for meaningful change. 6 months later, Elijah and Zoe walked through O'Hare International Airport, their carry-on luggage trailing behind them. Zoe, now 9, chatted excitedly about their upcoming vacation. "Do you think we'll see dolphins, Daddy? The website said sometimes they swim right up to the beach." "I hope so, sweetheart," Elijah replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. The past 6 months had been transformative for Skyline Airways. The comprehensive diversity initiative had been implemented across the organization. Complaints of discriminatory treatment had decreased significantly, while customer satisfaction scores had risen. The stock price, after an initial dip, had rebounded strongly. Patricia Harris had accepted the alternative position and, somewhat surprisingly, had become one of the most effective trainers in the program. Her first-hand perspective on how unconscious bias could affect behavior resonated with employees in a way that theoretical training never could. As they approached the Skyline check-in counter, the attendant greeted them warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Maxwell, Miss Maxwell. We're honored to have you flying with us today." "Thank you," Elijah replied, appreciating the professionalism that was now the standard rather than the exception. As they made their way to the first-class lounge, Elijah noticed a young black girl, perhaps 12 or 13, watching him with wide eyes. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispering something. The mother smiled and approached. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Maxwell, but my daughter Alicia is doing a school project on business leaders making a difference. She specifically chose you." Elijah crouched down to the girl's eye level. "Is that right?" Alicia nodded shyly. "I saw you on the news. I told my mom and dad I want to be like you someday, someone who changes things when they're not fair." Elijah felt a lump form in his throat. "That's a wonderful goal, Alicia. The world needs more people like you." As they continued to their gate, Zoe slipped her hand into his. "You changed things, Daddy. Just like you said we could." "We're just getting started, sweetheart," he replied, squeezing her hand. "We're just getting started." Elijah's story teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and compassion. True leadership isn't about wielding power, but using your position to create meaningful change. When Elijah revealed his identity as CEO, he could have simply punished Patricia without addressing the systemic issues. Instead, he recognized that transforming a culture requires more than removing one person, it demands creating new systems of accountability and education. The story also highlights how discrimination affects not just adults, but children who are learning how the world works. Zoe's innocent question, did we do something wrong? Reveals the devastating impact prejudice has on young minds. By standing firm yet offering Patricia a path to redemption, Elijah taught his daughter that justice and compassion can coexist. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that change happens when people refuse to accept the way things are. Every passenger who had previously experienced discrimination but remained silent contributed to a system that perpetuated injustice. It took one person willing to use their position of privilege to speak up not just for themselves, but for everyone who had been silenced before. Real change comes not from punishing individuals, but from transforming systems that allow discrimination to flourish in the first place. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and struggled with how to respond? Put yourself in Elijah's shoes. Would you have handled the situation the same way, or differently? Comment below with your own experiences or thoughts on the best way to address prejudice when you encounter it. If this story touched you or made you reflect on discrimination in your own life, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge us to create a more just world. Your engagement helps these important narratives reach more people who need to hear them. Share this video with someone who might be struggling to find their voice in the face of discrimination, or with someone who has the power to make changes in their organization. Sometimes the right story at the right time can be the catalyst for transformation. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in standing up for dignity and respect for all people. Remember, every time you speak up against injustice, you create ripples of change that extend far beyond that single moment. Until next time, keep standing tall and speaking truth.